Okay. Well, good afternoon. I'm happy to have everybody here. I know it's beautiful outside, and the fact that you're here is wonderful because that means you want to learn about your rights as a parent in education. Hopefully you'll take away some things about what you are allowed to do and what you have the right to do with education and how this can all help your children. But also we're going to talk a lot about parent engagement. This training is being sponsored by All for All, which is a coalition. But I also want to acknowledge that all of these organizations up here are part of that coalition. So if you just take a look for a moment, you can see all the really nice organizations in the Pittsburgh area that are part of this and help to provide training, support, and things that are appropriate for you as new Pittsburghers, new to the country, new to the system, and we couldn't do it without all these organizations. So can everybody understand me? Am I clear enough? And yeah, good. Okay. So this is our agenda here. We're going to review our goals. We're going to talk about different education entities in the United States. We're going to define rights, talk about basic education rights for your children and you, and the importance of the parent and caregivers' engagement in the public school system, because this might look a little different. And this is my piece. And then we're going to talk about discipline and behavior support. And I believe there is a little survey at the end. Yes? Okay. So that's where we're going today. This event is being filmed, as you can see. And let us know if you do not want to be filmed. So right now, if there's anybody that has hesitations or does not wish to be filmed, let us know, because when you ask questions, I believe the camera might be focused on you. If you don't have any hesitations, then you're agreeing and your photograph might be used today, okay? So these are some of the trainings that All for All is doing. I've had a lot of interaction with many of them: parent engagement, language access, English learner education, special education for students with disabilities, special education for gifted and talented children, and then discipline and behavior. So if you do want some more information, or if there's something that doesn't happen today that you would like to see, please get some more information from the Global Switchboard. Okay. So here are our goals. We want to honor the role and strength you have and your engagement with your child's education, okay? Because you as parents have a very, very strong influence on your children's education and their upbringing. We also want to educate you on the federal and state laws and regulations that apply not just to you, but also to your children, and that also include language access to a language you prefer. And then we're going to equip you with some strategies, tools, and resources that you can use to advocate for your families, your children, and build some relationships with your teachers and the school staff and hopefully others within the community, so that everybody can be successful. So I want to stop and ask you right now, and I hope we get some comments and some volunteers here. So what is your biggest hope for your children or your child? What is your biggest hope that you have for your children? We all have desires and dreams for our children.
Feel free to
Call it out. Call it out. I'm sorry? To be successful, absolutely. To be thriving and successful. Anything more? Anything specific? Anything you thought about after the school year was over that you thought, I really wish my child had this? Anything? To go to the highest peak, yes. To have a good career. Okay, great. To achieve their potential, absolutely. And we know that every child has great potential. Every child has a talent. It might be different than what the child next to them has. So just being able to understand that you have that right to expect and want that for your child, right? And to have a very comfortable education, an education where they feel good about themselves, happy, confident, and want to go to school every day. You know, that should be something that every one of your children feels good about. Going to school and wanting to be there and feeling like they belong and they're part of that school. So federal education laws apply to everybody living in the United States. Okay? We have federal laws that go across all of the United States, no matter what state you live in. Whether it's Pennsylvania here, should you decide to move to a different state. Did anybody come from a different state before they came to Pittsburgh? Anybody from a different state? Yes? Washington, D.C. Massachusetts? Virginia. Oh, I was in Virginia for a while. So no matter which of these states that you are in, you have federal laws that protect you and that apply to you and your children. One of those is really civil rights, okay? The Civil Rights Act, and we'll talk. You're going to hear more about that from the Education Law Center. But those civil rights, you know, the right to a free and public education, those are things that it doesn't matter where you live, what state, okay? Then you have state laws that apply to everybody living in a particular state. And I come from an education background. I'm a former ESL teacher. English is a second language. Did any of your children have ESL? Anybody have a child here who had to take specific English language? No. Okay. I did that for a while, but I also worked as an administrator. So I was also doing the overseeing teachers, supervising teachers, working with families, working with grants. So the state of Pennsylvania, for example, has certain laws and certain things that must be done. We have, for example, a specific exam that children who are learning English must take every year. That's just specific to Pennsylvania. Maybe other states, but not all states. Another thing in Pennsylvania that might be different would be the mandated testing that you must do yearly in certain subject matters. Not all states have that, okay? So those would be state education laws, and you'll hear a lot more about that. And then you have school district policies, because we also believe in school governing in Pennsylvania, which means that schools can create some of their own policies as long as they don't violate the first two. So as long as they're in line with state laws and federal laws, they can make policies. You know, they might have a policy in your particular school that says you have to have a doctor's note if your child is sick more than 3 days. Okay, that would be a school policy. Or you might have a policy within your school that says you have a dress code, which means you have to wear certain clothing. It might be a uniform. It might be that you have to wear certain clothing that is more dressy than casual in some cases. So those are what we call school policy. So what is a right? It's the legal entitlement to have or obtain something. So for example, students have rights. Okay? They have a right to their free education. Parents and caregivers also have rights. Okay? So there are things that you are allowed to do or say. You are allowed to ask for your language to be translated on written documents. You might say that you don't want it translated, but you want somebody to call you and have it read to you in another language, okay? You also have the right to, at least question a placement of your child's academic standing. So they'll talk more about that later, but those are the rights that, you have. Those are just some examples. Why did these come up this way? Right, okay. Well, let's just go back here for a second. These were supposed to be quizzes, but that's okay. Okay, so if you look at the true and false, it says undocumented children cannot attend public schools in the U.S. Well, that is absolutely false. Every child is allowed to attend a public school. Nobody should ask you for any legal documentation that says that you have a legal right here. It doesn't matter. So you do not need to provide a social security number for your child to register. Okay. Now, some schools do use social security numbers, but if you don't have one, they can't prohibit you or refuse you entry into the school. They must accept something else. You do not need to have that. You must, however, provide proof of your child's age. Okay? It does not have to be a birth certificate. Typically, they do ask for a birth certificate. But if you can't provide one, maybe you don't have one, then perhaps you could look at school records from somewhere else that says what age the child is. Maybe you have a baptismal certificate. A lot of the baptismal certificates also state what the age of your child is. Or it could be some official documentation from a doctor's office, etc. Okay? You can also provide an affidavit, which is a signed piece of paper that is signed by you stating, I say that my child is 10 years old. His or her birthday was, and then give the date. Okay? And then you sign it. Okay? But we really do need to know your child's age because we provide education based on the age of your child, not how many years they went somewhere else. Let's say the system you came from was a little different. We put them in an age-appropriate class so that they can, again, be with people, children their own age. Okay? So the job of the school is to make sure that that child is caught up or they get what they need. So here's your child's right to a free and public education. You can go to public education for elementary, middle school, or high school, regardless of whether you're documented or not, all three. Okay? Schools cannot ask for that social security number, and they can require documents to prove age, etc. And if you can, I will tell you from experience as a teacher, if you have records from other schools, any sort of records that talk about what they did in the other schools, what subjects they studied, maybe showing what areas their report card have on them, what they did in school, what classes they took. That is very helpful. That is very, very helpful in helping your child get to their best potential. And even if you don't have records, it's important that you get involved because if you can tell people what your child is good at or what your child did well or what your child studied, that is a very big help to the teachers. They really, really want to do the best for them. So you telling the teachers what they studied, what they did well in, what they might struggle with, what they need help with, that is so important. So in the United States, unlike many countries, it's an expectation that you participate in school. Okay? And I realize that this may not be the same in many cultures. Okay? So what I see sometimes happening in schools, and it makes me sad, is that sometimes a teacher will say, oh, his parents never call me. His parents never ask me questions. They never come in and talk to me. They don't care. Then I talk to the parent, and the parent says, well, I'm trying to respect the teacher because in my culture, teachers are very respected, and I don't want to feel like I'm stepping over them and doing something that is inappropriate. Like they are the expert, I'm not. So I feel like if I say something, the teacher's going to think I'm making trouble or that I don't trust them. Okay? So that's a case where it's very important to know what the culture here is, and that is parents get involved. We see parents in schools. We see parents calling and asking questions. We see parents emailing if they see a grade that they're not sure about or they're uncomfortable with, okay? That's your right to participate. That's part of participation. And you have that right fully in all areas of your child's education. Maybe you're uncomfortable with an assignment that comes home. Maybe somebody gives your child homework and you feel it's an inappropriate assignment or uncomfortable for them or it makes them feel bad. That's your right to call the parent, to call the school and say, I'm uncomfortable. Can we talk about this? Okay. So those are just a few examples. So what is parent engagement in your community or in your home country? Anybody want to share what parent engagement looked like if you came from another country? Is it different? Did anybody have a situation where in your country you didn't participate much because that was the teacher's job and that's the way it was reviewed? Yes? No? What do you think? No? You participate. Okay. Anybody have a different way of looking at student engagement, parent engagement? Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And that is very true. Here you do have the ability, it might not always happen, as you said, but you do have the right to go to a school board meeting and say, I don't like that curriculum. You know, maybe a group of parents go and say, this curriculum is not meeting the needs of our children. You have that right, okay? And so in that respect, that is a lot different than what you experienced, and this was you growing up, correct? Yeah. Okay, so that's a very big difference. Yeah, we do have that right. Any other comments before we go on? Any questions so far? We're going to have lots of time for questions, so just want to. Okay. Let's just look at this scenario a minute, okay? I'll read it with you, and then we're going to talk it through. Angela is 9 years old and goes to an elementary school. She lives with her mother and 2 younger siblings in a small apartment in the city. Angela's mother is the only one taking care of 3 children, so she has to work 2 jobs to provide. Angela is a smart student, but she doesn't feel happy at school, and she doesn't want to go to school every day. Her teacher believes Angela could do anything if she put her mind and effort into her studies. Unfortunately, it's challenging for teacher and Angela's mom to meet and talk about ways to help Angela do better due to Mrs. Enam's busy schedule. Okay, so why should Angela's mother get involved in the school? Why should she get involved? Think back to this. She's going to do a lot better, right? Yeah, yeah. What good things can happen if she gets involved? Angela will be happier, hopefully. Yes, yes. I mean, that is the worst thing when you know your child's unhappy in school. What can Angela's teacher learn from her mother to help her be successful? What can her teacher learn from her mother? Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, what you can share with the teachers about how your child is at home, you know, what your child does best, what your child's needs are, you know, what things maybe make them afraid. Those are so important. It's so important that you know each and every child and what's best for them. And when that happens, she is going to be more successful because there's a communication. But what challenges do you have, like Mrs. Inam, in facing in getting school success? Like, what kind of challenges might she have?
Versus I have to take time off work and go to school and help her be better. I think as parents we struggle to have a balance, but you know, for me, what I tell myself is, how about providing ahead, providing breakfast? At the end of the day, they don't achieve their full potential, and you just have to balance it and make sure that you're doing the best and being able to take time off work a little bit to go help the child.
Absolutely.
But that's kind of the challenge as a parent.
Absolutely. I'm sure each and every one of you works very hard, and having to work and then maybe make time for the homework, the child time, and in addition to working, you know, making sure dinner's on the table, breakfast is made, lunch is taken care of. All of those things are a challenge because you don't just have one job. You have many. So what kind of good things can happen when they communicate together, the parent and... What kind of good things happen? I hear somebody else want to chime in?
It actually helps the teacher to know more about the child, and the child is going to be more better in school too.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I will tell you a very small story. When I was a teacher, I had a child who was not very good in class. He was smart. He did his work and he was very smart, but he liked to make some trouble. He was always out of his seat, talking to another child, not listening. So I would email the parent home and I would say, you know, I'm having difficulty. And the parent would say to me, well, you know, we would go back and forth on email, and we never really talked about what this child's needs were. And that was my fault too. I just concentrated on his discipline, and the parent just concentrated on the fact that the child wasn't like that at home. Sometimes, yes, but not very much. And so we didn't understand each other. But when I finally picked up the phone and I called her, I said, you know, I don't think we should talk on email anymore. I think we should talk on the phone. And we did. And I discovered a lot about this child. What I discovered was that this child lost his grandfather 2 years ago. And that grandfather meant the world to him. He was like his father. He did everything with this child. And that really made this child hurt. And if I had known that this child was hurting, I might have done something a little differently. I might have really, really worked in a different way. So that's why I say you really do need to talk to your teachers. The teachers need to talk to the parents and let them know if there's any challenges or, you know, what the children are going through, if there's something different happening at home. And after that, we had the best relationship. I told the mom, I said, I wish we talked in the beginning of the year. And she said, me too. And then we started to realize we knew a lot of the same people. We were very similar, and we had a good relationship. And that was all because we took the time. And it was not during the workday. It was at night when we could both talk. So you have the right to ask teachers to meet you or to talk with you when your schedule provides, so that you don't always have to take off work. Okay? So keep that in mind. You do have that right. You can say, I work, I'm so sorry. Could we meet before school, maybe in the evening? Is there a time we could talk on the phone? Let them know what your hours are and what hours you could be free. So here's some ways that you as a caregiver can help your child do well in school. Okay? First of all, have academic expectations. Okay? Make sure they know that the academics are important to you as well. They need to do their homework first. They can't come home, go outside and play, and then they come home and tell you they're tired and they can't do homework. The expectation is you have to do the academic work. Communicate about school. Ask them, how was your day today? Tell me one thing you learned. Tell me one thing you liked. Tell me one thing that was good about your day. Maybe tell me one thing that was not so good about your day. Be specific, though. How many of you have ever asked your child, how was your day, or what did you learn today, and they say nothing? Be honest. I know mine do. Yeah. What did you learn today? Nothing. I'm like, yeah, right. So maybe ask in a different way, So tell me one thing good that happened today. It could be that they got a chocolate chip cookie at lunch, and that was the last one. And they were happy. Or it could be, I didn't get picked for the team today in kickball, and that made me really sad. I was the last child picked, And that's an opportunity for you to talk about that and see what you could do to make it better. Because if you do that, chances are they're not going to be sad about going to school. You can make them assured that they're good at other things. Read to your children. Read. It doesn't have to be anything classic. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It can be maybe an article in the newspaper that you want to talk about. It could be a very short story book. If you do speak another language, it could be in your native language. I 100% believe that it's really important to keep 2 languages if you can. Try to speak another language with your child, or read to them in another language so that they get used to that. And have some homework rules. No playing outside until homework's done. No TV until homework's done. Homework only when the TV is off. If you can. I know sometimes there's not a lot of space, or sometimes you have other children who make noise, so it's not always so quiet. But some sort of a rule, maybe have a specific place that they can go to for that homework, or that they know that that's their quiet place. That's their time to do the work. Yes?
We have a family friend who, because the dad never read to the child actually thought the father couldn't read. It took some event for her to be like, oh, dad can actually read. So it really is important, not just for that child, but you don't know what your kids are thinking, right?
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
And then the other thing I wanted to add is read with your children. It's so much easier to read to them when they're younger. When they start to get into middle school, high school, I don't do this all the time, but I do try with my daughter who's in middle school and now going into high school. I will pick up the same book that they're reading in their curriculum, or she'll share with me what they're reading, and we'll read it together. And, it gives me an opportunity to we then have conversations about, oh, okay, when you got to that passage, what did you think about it? Or we read a mystery one together, and she was like, did you think that person did it? So it just gives you an opportunity to read with them, to have like natural conversations, especially when they start to get to that age and it gets harder to have those natural conversations. And at the same time, obviously, reading what they're reading gives you an insight into some of the philosophies that they're being exposed to and things like that.
Thank you so much. Yes, that is so important.
I just wanted to interrupt quickly and say that there are 15 people watching a live stream, and there's been one comment so far, and it was a question you asked earlier about engagement in your home country, and someone mentioned that children can go to boarding school and then you don't have very much engagement at all. But I just wanted you to invite people who are watching online to continue to engage in the comments.
Yeah,
and we
please
can
do.
make sure you get those.
Yeah, if you make sure I get them, that would really help. Yeah, that's, I mean, and we don't have many people going to boarding school here, but I think that that is an opportunity that exists in many cultures. Is this on? Hello? Yeah. Does anybody come from a culture where boarding schools are common? Yeah? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is harder. That is very different. You know, you're almost like your child's on their own, you're on your own. But I still think there are ways to get involved. You know, I think in a boarding school situation, it's more going on visiting days, maybe making sure that you call your child regularly and talk to them about what they are doing and how they are feeling and how things are going. Maybe sending an email to a teacher or to a headmaster or whoever is the school director, asking how things are going. You know, is there anything that you should know, or are there any dates coming up that you might need to take some time off for? So, thank you for sharing that. Okay. So what you need to know is that your involvement really does matter. Okay, because your child truly does benefit when you get involved. You benefit because now you are a part of that system and you start to feel like a community. And then your children's school really benefits too, because now they know that you are a real community member. You're a member of that school community. And school is a community. It's another part of the community. You might think, well, my church is a big community, but your school can be a community too. So your school does really benefit when they have all of you involved and you're giving your ideas, and somebody that even goes in there and says, yeah, read with your child. Maybe we could have a child and parent book club. Wow, that would be a great idea. So that's how schools benefit, when they get these ideas from you, and you share your culture. You come in, you're willing to talk to teachers and students. Maybe you can take a day here and there that you can do some volunteer work in the school. I know some people just need help copying papers. Some schools want parents to come in and help on the field day when the children are outside playing and they need an extra set of hands, an extra set of eyes. Or it could be a field trip, when your children go somewhere for an out-of-school activity and they just need some parents and people involved. You really do have strengths and superpowers. I love that picture because you truly are a superhero to your child. They might not let you know that they know that, but you are their power, you are their strength. And you were their first teachers. You were the ones who they spent those first years with before school started. They watched you, they found out, and they found your examples, you guided them with those examples, and then you know your children better than anyone else. You really know what they like, what they dislike. So your presence shows that you are interested in them and that you want them to do well. So, being a good parent also means not just showing up, but showing your child by, telling them, this is what I want for you. You did this really well, and I'm proud of you. And this is what I did when I was young, and I want you to be able to do that too. Okay? So keep that in mind. So how else can you be involved? Well, you have the primary role in your child's learning. Okay? They're only in school a little bit of the time. Now we're in the summer months. So how many of you have children in camp? They go to camp? Yeah? Okay. And some children are home, so they're with you a lot more than they are in the schools. Use a two-way communication. And what that means is sometimes what I see happening is the school feels like they're doing a good job communicating because they send you letters and memos and emails, and you get all this communication from school. You get a packet like this, and they say, oh, we communicated with the parents. But that's not two-way. You have that right to ask questions back. You get that pile of stuff and you're not sure you understand something, call a school. Pick up the phone and say, I don't understand this, or I want to talk to you about this item that was in my package, or I'd like to talk to you about an idea I have. So that's two-way communication, making sure that you have the right to talk to the school and they're just not constantly communicating to you. Promoting learning at home, making sure that your child knows how important this is, how important learning is, and then an education is for you. Decision making. Develop your advocacy and leadership in rules in school decisions. Again, maybe you get something home that says they're going to be doing something new in school. Maybe call the school if you're not happy with it or you don't understand it and say, well, do we all have to do this? Or is there a way that we could, this is not good for my lifestyle right now. I can't do this. So ask them if you can be involved in the decision making. There are a lot of people that go to the PTA meetings, Parent-Teacher Association meetings, or the board meetings. Like maybe something big's going to happen. Here's an example. Right now I'm working with a school district and they are thinking of closing one of their schools that has 20% English learners. 20% of these children speak Spanish, and they're going to close the school. And now they're going to have a vote. Okay. And I'm making sure that as many parents as possible go to that meeting, to be there, to make sure that they voice their opinion. Because if that school closes, their children are going to sit on a bus for 45 minutes to go somewhere else. Okay. So you do have rights to say, I don't like this. If you're voting, I want to be part of that vote. Let's see what we can do. Or, they have these meetings where the board might vote. Your opinion, your voices, if enough people say something, might change minds. Okay. Volunteer. Be engaged with your kids' schools. Like I said, if you can't do something on a regular basis, ask what opportunities. Give them the times you are free. Here are days or here are times that I could help. Or maybe I can't help, but I could do it online. Or I could do it, in my free time if there's something I could do at home and send. That's ways of volunteering. And then try to find out what resources are in your community that might help your children. Sometimes there's homework centers. Sometimes there's after-school programs that communities do. Find out what's in your area. What activities, what items are available to your child. It could be a sports camp that's free. It could be a scholarship program where they can sign up for things. So here are some other tips. I always suggest you meet your child's teacher at the beginning of the year as soon as you can. Okay? If they have an open house or a day where you can walk through, try to walk through and shake their hand, meet them, say hello, tell them who you are and who your child is. Get to know the school in particular. Okay? Find out who the secretaries are. Believe me, the secretaries know a lot. They're the ones that are picking up the phone when you're calling. So if you can introduce yourself to a secretary or call and say, hi, my name is, what's your name? Are you, at the front desk? Find out who the counselors are. Find out who the principals are. Find out who is who in the school, not just the teacher. Because the school is made up of a lot of people. It's made up of the principal, the assistant principal maybe, a counselor, secretaries. Sometimes they have specific lunch people that run the cafeteria. Believe it or not, those are the people you want to talk to sometimes too, because maybe your child has dietary restrictions and you want to make sure they know that your child can't eat a certain thing or that they have a certain diet. Ask for those conferences when it's convenient for you. You can ask them, you can say, you know, that date is not really good for me. Is there another time we can meet? I'll be willing to meet you somewhere halfway. You know, we could talk on phone, we could do a Zoom chat, whatever, but, you know, what can we do to meet my schedule too? Apply for special services if you think your child needs them. You know, I mean, ask the school if you think your child needs some extra assistance, if they're struggling in a subject, or you think that they really should be tested for special education. Talk to the teacher, find out what the teacher thinks. You know, the teacher might be afraid to bring it up to you. And again, there's nothing wrong. I mean, the important thing is that your child gets whatever they deserve and what makes it good for them. Seek out homework help if you need some. Ask the school, is there homework help? Are there tutors? Are there any sort of programs? Is there a intervention period for my child that they could learn what they don't understand? You also have the right to monitor their video time, their text time, any of that, their screen time. And talk with your child about the school and encourage independent learning. One of the things I like to do is to make sure that children know that it's okay to make a mistake, okay? Independent learning means they are going to make a mistake. So if your child comes home with a mistake and they're very upset about it, it's a learning experience. You know, do you understand what you did wrong? Would you do it better the next time? Most teachers would tell you that's how we learn, is by encouraging them to try and be independent and not always get the right answer. Maybe you have to look a little harder for it. As a teacher, again, I would find the children would come up to me and they'd raise their hands and they'd say, is that right? Is my answer right? And I'd say, do you think it's right? And they would look at me and I'd say, if I give you all the answers, you didn't work hard. I want you to work hard. I mean, I'm not grading this for right or wrong. I was grading it just to see how they were learning and if they could do the questions. And I said, and at the end, I'll give you the answers and you look and tell me. So that's the type of encouragement, making sure that they are independent, okay? So just don't do the work for them all the time. It's easy for them to ask you. So there are challenges. We realize the challenges. There's the time, the resources, the logistics, the equity. You know, you might not feel like you have, you know, equity in all ways because, you know, you have some challenges with your scheduling. The power. You know, maybe, you know, you feel like the teacher has more power, but they don't, really. You have rights. Assumptions. That goes back to my question again, like, be careful about assumptions. You know, the teachers that assumed you didn't care because you might not have questioned something, and then you assume that the teacher doesn't need your input because you don't want to hurt their feelings or make them feel like you don't trust them. So that's an assumption. You assumed one thing, they assumed another, and you had no conversation. And who loses out? Everybody. You, the teacher, and your child. So it's very, very important that we keep an open mind and think, if you have a gut feeling you need to talk to your teacher, you talk to them. So knowing what you know now, what are 3 things? I'm going to throw this out and see if we have some on the stream too. What are 3 things that you can do for your child in your child's school and at home? What are 3 things that you will do? Will anybody try to go to a board meeting? I would suggest, I know it's usually, they're long and sometimes, but I would suggest going to one here and there and I think when they start to see parents come, you know, it's an eye-opener for them that, you know, we better be making sure we're paying attention. What else? What other things would you do that you might not have done today?
Being a volunteer to the school.
Volunteer.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, find out how you can volunteer. Just say, hey, what can I do? Here are my times. Here's my schedule. Here's my restrictions. How could I help? What could I do? Anything else? Well, I'm going to give you a resource just now. Let's see here. Okay, don't be afraid to ask questions. Like I said, talk to other parents, Strike up some conversations with other parents about things. Maybe you're sitting in a school setting where you're doing parent-teacher night, or it's open house. Introduce yourself. Ask them. How their child likes school. Who is their child? Find out your rights from local organizations such as this. We already talked about volunteer, and remember, you know what's best for your child more than anybody else. So speak up for them, please. And that education is a right. It's not just for some people, it's for everyone. Everyone has the right and everyone deserves to learn. And they deserve to learn and meet their full potential. There is something called the English Learner Family Toolkit. If you have a cell phone on you right now, and I don't know, I'm assuming we have really good internet here because it looks like everything's working well. They're in Google Play or in the Apple Store. If you just type in English Learner Family Toolkit, you can download this, and it is a wonderful resource for you. It has different sections, and in some of the sections talk about enrollment in school. What are your rights for enrollment? Some of them talk about rights for special education. Some of them talk about rights for parent-teacher engagement. One of them talks about rights for after school. What do you do when you graduate? Graduation rights. And what I like most about it is there are a list of questions. They give you the questions you can ask the school. So take a look. Did anybody download that? Okay, take a look at some of the chapters. There's a list of questions in each chapter so that if you're not sure how to express yourself, maybe you're thinking of something that you want to ask the school but you're not sure how to phrase it, they give you the questions right there. And there are a lot of questions. So you might want to jot down a few of the questions that you like from there, and those are the questions you ask when you want to communicate next year. And this is a really good time. This is summer. We're all a little more relaxed, I hope. Right? I know it's a different routine because, kids are sleeping in or, it's just a different schedule. But it is a time to think about next year and how to start that year. And what I love about this time of year is it's like next year's going to be new. It's going to be fresh. It's going to be, you might say to your child, next year we're going to do this. This is going to be our new goal. So you can start thinking about that with your child this summer. Talk to them. What are your goals for yourself? Because I believe that children need to have their own goals too. And when we let them have their own goals and help with that decision making, they're part of the process. So, questions? Any questions? I didn't bring this up, but the difference, and this is something that, how many of you have elementary children, little ones? How many of you have middle schoolers and high schoolers? I know that sometimes parent engagement looks different in middle school and high school, and I will tell you that a lot of times my son would tell me when he was in high school, Mom, parents don't come anymore to school because that just embarrasses us. I went anyways, okay? So don't let your child tell you that, because you can be the parent there like me, asking the questions. So I embarrassed him, but that's okay. The other thing is, really try to learn how to use the online system, because that's how you see your children's grades nowadays. Most of the systems are all online. So you have the right to ask the school, I don't understand the system. Are you going to have a training? Could I talk to somebody about how to get on there? Make sure you understand how to see grades, information, because when you see things live, you can see almost immediately how your child is doing on a day-to-day basis, because teachers are typically putting grades in as we go. So you want to make sure you know that. You also want to make sure if you have a child in high school that they have a graduation plan for your child in place. Okay? Like if you came from a different state, a different country, I want you to make sure you understand what the plan is for graduation. In most cases, at least for English learners and special education, they can stay in school until they're 21. So if your child is taking English as a second language, they are allowed to stay until they're 21. So if they need more credits to graduate, they have the time. But let's say they don't have that ESL certification need. Maybe you go to the school and say, you know, can I talk to you about what does my child need to do in order to graduate on time? You know, what courses do they need to take, particularly if you're coming in the middle of high school? You know, show me what it looks like so that I know and you're not scrambling the last minute. So that's a few things that I like to bring up on the high school level. Yes?
Thank you so much. We are about to start our school journey, and I need to know, because we came in from Nigeria, and we're not too sure about how the system here works. I learned that if you're staying in one school district, you cannot go to another school district, that it doesn't work that way. That's different from what we experience in Nigeria. I mean, you can go anywhere, you can even go take your child to another state and all those things. What are the terms? Suppose you don't like the school in your district, what do you do to take your child to another school, another district for schooling and all that?
Well, okay, there's some options. If you're not happy with your school district, you really can't just go to another school district, okay? Because you're paying taxes to that district. That is a state law that you must go to the district. However, there are schools called charter schools. And a charter school is run like a public school, but you can go if they're in a different area of town. It doesn't matter where you live. You can apply and place your child in a charter, okay? So those are the options, or of course there's always a private school, but you must pay for that. But the charter schools are free. Charter schools are free, and you do not have, doesn't have to be in your district. I would suggest, it's a tricky, Hatal, do you have any ideas like who they would talk to? Like, I could always give recommendations. Typically a public school isn't going to recommend other charters, because you see, when you take your child to a charter school, that money goes to the charter school. You don't give it, but the school has to pay for it. Okay? But there are charter schools here. There's somebody just talked about Penn Hills Charter. Yeah, Penn Hills Charter School is one that I know of. Young Scholars is one that I know of. I mean, I could probably come up with, there are cyber charter schools too, all over the state that you can go to online. But you have that option if you're not happy. You do have that option. But you cannot decide that you want to live in one area and go to school in another district. That you cannot do. The only time I think that's ever legal is if you're homeless. And that's a whole other story. You know, if you start in one school, they have to let you continue. Did that answer your question? Yeah. I mean, you can always move. But the charter schools are what I see parents doing when they're not happy or when they want something different. Yeah. But you would want to maybe talk, I would consider looking in, just searching charter schools in Pittsburgh area, and then maybe finding out if you can talk to parents that have students there. They should have some people. I'm sure they were going to give you people that like the school, but you know, it would be important to talk to people that go there and see, do you like it? Why did you choose this school? You know, what do you feel is different for your child here? But you have that right. So, very good question.
coming, school is not a priority in terms of the performance of the school in the area where we find ourselves. We first just think about housing, and then we just settle somewhere. But I want to bring this up because I know people are watching and they can learn from the session in terms of, it's very critical and crucial that wherever you live, you're comfortable with the school, because once you're there, except you move, you're kind of stuck. There are options, but they're limited. So school, just understanding the school district, whether you are renting, whether you are buying, I think that's what a lot of parents take that as a number one factor when they're in the market to buy a house. How good is the school district? Because once you buy a house, you're basically stuck there until you sell. If you're renting, you're more flexible. After your lease is up, you can move. So I just want to, again, add that, as we come in looking for a housing, we should always pay attention to where we live, how good is the school district, and if we're comfortable living there and our children going to the school in that area.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes.
This is a question from online. Do charter schools have school buses for pickup?
Yes and no. I think it just depends. It's usually the home school that transports them. Yeah. But it has to be within 10 miles. Correct? Yeah.
Within the district or within 10 miles.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that goes for private schools too. I mean, if you do choose to pay and go to a private school, as long as it's within 10 miles of where you live, the public school district you live in must pay for that transportation. Yeah, that's another very good question. But yeah, I mean, thinking about where you live and how the schools, if you're comfortable with the schools, asking people in the area, what do you think of the schools? If you have that luxury. I know a lot of times when particularly refugees move, the first place they move to is given to them by an agency. Typically, the agency picks the house for you. But you're not tied to that. Most of those places are temporary rentals. And that's a good opportunity for you to think about, do you like it there? Do you want to move? Yes.
Which do you think is more important, living in a good school district versus having parents that are involved in your children's education?
Ooh, I'd say both. Honestly, I think, personally, if I had to say which is better, I'd say parent involvement, because I personally believe that, if you have a parent who's really fighting for you and working with you, I think that you can do well almost anywhere. I do. I mean, there are schools that have limited resources, but if you have a good parent population, and I live in a district that is very affluent, but I will tell you, the school is terrible. It's old, it doesn't have good equipment, but the parents are involved. And the parents make that school good for their children the best they can. So, I mean, again, that's an opinion, but you really do want to be involved in your child's education for those reasons. That I do think that, no matter where you live, if you're making sure that there's a push for that.
Can we transition to the next
Yes. Yes. I mean, we can bring this back up again at the end. I'm going to turn it over right now to the Education Law Center and to Hital, who is going to give you some more information. You have to go up there. It's a little intimidating.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Hathel Dagat, and I am one of the lawyers with the Education Law Center. We're a statewide organization, and I work right here out of our Pittsburgh office. I will share our contact information if later on you would like to get in touch with us. We are a nonprofit organization, and it is our mission to ensure that all children in Pennsylvania have access to a quality public education. We do things like represent families. We try to change policies in schools, try to change policies at the state level, and we do trainings and workshops for parents to make sure that they understand their public education rights. I'll have the intake line number up again at the end, but you should feel free to call us if you have specific questions about your child and their education. We also have on our website a back-to-school guide, which has over 60 fact sheets on topics that might be of interest to you, such as enrollment in schools. We have a separate fact sheet on transportation that can answer questions about what a public school needs to do to transport children, a charter school, public school. We have information on attendance requirements here, if any of you have ever gotten any truancy information. And we have information on things like discipline and many, many other tools that hopefully would be helpful to you. So today I was asked to talk about special education and gifted education. So I'll try to kind of get through a slide or two and then open it up for questions, because I want to make sure I'm giving you information that's actually useful to you and answering any questions that I can. So we're mostly today going to be talking about special education in the K through 12 context, so in your regular public school. But I do want to just say a brief word about early intervention services, which are for students who may require special services. I'm sorry, not students, for young, very young babies and children who may require services. So there is infant and toddler early intervention, which serves children birth through age 2. And there is early intervention for ages 3 through 5. Of course, for the birth through age 2, an agency or their employees would come into your home and assist you if your child required that special assistance. Whereas ages 3 through 5, there may be other preschool programs where the agency would send someone to help your child. So I just wanted to give a brief word on that, and I'm happy to talk afterwards for those of you who have very, very little children who are not yet school age, but who have, and you think maybe would benefit from early intervention services. Some of you may already be in touch with different agencies who do provide those services, but just a quick heads up before we move into kindergarten through 12th grade. I wanted to say a little bit about language access for special education, and in fact, all meetings with the school. In case any of you have a partner or anyone else in the family who requires information in a different language, school districts are required under federal law to provide important information to you in the language of your preference. So some of you, when you enrolled your child in school, hopefully all of you, had to fill out a home language survey where they ask you what languages are spoken in the home and what language you would like to have spoken to you when the school gets in touch with you. So they should be following that and translating any important paperwork into your preferred language. I know sometimes that doesn't happen, and sometimes schools need a reminder. So this is just a reminder to you all that if you do require any information in a different language, please ask your school for it. They are required under law to provide that to you. That also means that if you require an interpreter during any meetings with the school, whether you're talking about discipline or if you're talking about special education, the school needs to provide that to you also. If you would like, your child or another sibling of your child, another one of your children can interpret during the meeting, but it's really the school's responsibility to make sure that there's an interpreter there at your meeting. So, special education in the U.S. Every year, millions of children in this country with disabilities receive special services at school. And these services are part of what we call, generally speaking, the special education program. These children who receive these services, they may have difficulty staying focused at school. They may have difficulty controlling their behavior. They may have difficulties with reading, comprehension, or writing, math. They may also have health conditions or physical disabilities. Here in the U.S., children with special needs have the legal right to receive special education or support from the public school system. We do not automatically segregate children into different schools. We try our best to educate all children with their peers with the appropriate supports so they can make progress in light of their disability, right? Even if your child has a disability, they will make progress. It may look different than the type of progress any non-disabled children may make, but it is the responsibility of every public school to make sure that all children make progress. Special education is also instruction designed to meet the individual needs of children. You'll hear me say the word individual a lot because, of course, no two children are the same, and likewise, no two children have the same special education needs. So any plan or instruction for children with disabilities is going to be individualized, very specific to their needs. And we will, of course, that is so they can make progress in their school. This is done at no extra cost to parents. It's still a public education. And again, these special services are designed to help a child make progress in school. So how do you know whether your child requires special education services? Because some children just may require extra supports in school, but not what we would call official special education. Who can ask for an evaluation? Your child's teacher could ask for an evaluation. Perhaps they've observed your child during class and would like your child to be evaluated. You can also ask for that evaluation to be completed. If you have concerns about the way your child is behaving in school, so for example, if your child is repeatedly being sent home for the same misbehavior, perhaps you want to sit down with the school and see if you can investigate what's happening. Perhaps you notice that your child is learning differently than their siblings. This is another way for you to reach out to the school. You don't have to be sure that they require special education services, but if you do have concerns, please reach out to your school and request an evaluation. What should you know about the evaluations? They are free. You will be asked for your permission to do an evaluation if you're not the one who requested it. So they'll give you a form to sign saying, yes, I permit you to evaluate my child. If your child is more proficient in another language other than English, it will be administered to them in that other language because, of course, we want an accurate understanding of their abilities, not of their English-speaking abilities, of course, but sort of their cognitive, behavioral, emotional abilities. It will be done, it will be completed, the evaluation will be completed by a knowledgeable professional. It will be multifaceted. That means there will be multiple assessment tests that will be given to the child. There will most likely be observation, so classroom observation of the child. And this next point is really important. You will be getting, you would get a parent questionnaire where you would be able to input your comment and observations about your child. That, of course, is incredibly important because the school only sees your child in the classroom with their peers. You see your child at home and in all other environments. The evaluation will be completed within 60 days, not including the summer days. Unfortunately, the staff that school needs sometimes to do those evaluations are not present during the summer, and of course, your child is also very likely not in school during the summer. Any questions about just sort of what is special education and also an evaluation for special education? Yes.
Thank you so much. Supposing your child, the teacher observes something about your child and is asking for an evaluation on that regard, and you don't see anything wrong with the child, you just feel the child is okay. That's how you guys are in your family, you know. But they're already tagging it something else and all that. What do you do? Because you may not be okay with the evaluation going on, and already it gives you kind of mindsets. Why is the teacher looking at my child that way, and all that? So you begin to become uncomfortable already.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. You have the right to say no. You can say, no, I don't want to have that evaluation. But before that even happens, what the school should not just send you a letter that says, please sign this permission to evaluate. My hope is that there would actually be a conversation with you first about what they're observing and what their concerns are. Generally speaking, if a school is going to be doing a special education evaluation, then the concerns have been going on for a long time, right? Teachers see a whole range of students in their classroom, and they don't simply think that because one child is learning differently or has difficult classroom behavior to manage, that suddenly this child must need an evaluation. It will very likely be repeated instances where the teacher is thinking about it and concerned, and you would have been alerted already and engaged in that dialogue if there were concerns by the teacher. But I do want to say you do have the right to say no. No, I don't want my child evaluated.
One of the things you said in your comment is that maybe that child is doing something that we do in our family, and that's what Gina talked about earlier is so important, that you have continual conversations with the teachers so that they know, right? Like if your child, is very smart, very bright, but likes to just move to, all the time, or they love to read in a corner by themselves, right? Like just having those conversations with the teacher can sometimes help mitigate some of the misunderstandings about culture or habits, or even if a child has gone through a recent trauma, like the story that Gina told, sharing that with the teachers may just help them be like, okay, we may need to take a different approach for a time, and then we'll reevaluate the situation.
Keeping those lines of communication open with your teacher is very important. And I do not think I've seen a situation where a teacher has immediately gone to an request for evaluation without already having multiple conversations with the family to see if they can figure out what's going on. But you can also reach out to the teacher yourself, and initiate that conversation if you feel like they are focusing on some behavior of your child that is very culturally appropriate for what you're familiar with. Please explain that to your teacher, because they may be limited in what they're familiar with in terms of other cultures. Yes. Mm-hmm.
For people who have kids in private schools and as kind of sensing that the child might have special needs or need special assistance through school, are there programs, just prior researching, looks like you have to go through your school district. Mm-hmm. Are there comments you can make on how to go about that, getting those support from the school district, even if the child is not in public school?
Yeah, there are certain supports that the public school will be able to offer. They'll need to work with a child's private school, if a child is in private school, in order for that to happen. I do want to say that most of what we're talking about today are really requirements for public schools, and it is not automatic that your child will receive an appropriate public education if they're at private school. No school should be discriminating against a child due to their disability, but depending on the nature of your child's disability, a private school may not be able to address their needs. And in some cases would not even be required under law to do that. Certainly, I have friends and know people who send their children to private school that have a different kind of plan called a 504 plan, which we'll talk about later. So it is possible to get some services. And of course, private schools also give all sorts of other supports that are not, would not fall under special education, the laws that I'm talking about today. but I think there is an understanding from all schools, including private schools where you pay tuition, that they do need to cater to a wide variety of student needs. So based on that evaluation, which of course will be shared with you, and you'll see a list of all of the assessments that were done, you will see your parent comments, you will see teacher comments, and perhaps even classroom observation of your child. All of that will decide whether, for example, your child is eligible for an individualized education plan, an IEP. Some of you may already have children with an IEP, but if the evaluation shows that your child has one of the disabilities listed in the law and they require special education as a result of that disability, then your child will receive an IEP. So some of the categories of the disabilities listed in the law are autism, speech impairment, learning disabilities such as dyslexia, anxiety disorder, ADHD, intellectual disability, physical disability, and there are a couple more as well, but those are some of the ones I think folks are most familiar with. Alternatively, your child could qualify for a 504 accommodation plan, which I just mentioned. That is for a child with a mental or physical disability that substantially limits one or more major life function, and that child may need accommodations in order to attend and make progress in public school. Some of those examples are asthma, if your child has asthma, or diabetes, ADHD, and those types of accommodations may be different. So for example, it could be as simple as a child who uses a wheelchair may need to take an elevator and may need extra time between classes, right, to get to the next class they have to go to. It may be that simple. It may be a different type of attendance plan for a child, for example, who has an illness that requires them to be absent a lot and go to the hospital a lot. So that is less of the school needing to teach a child special skills or have an alternate teaching curriculum, but more sort of what accommodation can we give the child just so that they can actually attend school. Even if your child is not eligible under an IEP or a 504 plan, a child may, the evaluation may list recommended classroom interventions. And those are just things that your child's teacher can do to help your child during class. So it may be the child is going to sit near the front of the classroom. We know they have some attention issues or they like to chat with their friends sitting next to them. Let's make sure this child is placed in the first or second row closer to the teacher. So there are certain interventions that can be done which don't necessarily require an IEP or a 504 plan. We'll talk a little bit more about what happens if you disagree with the results of the evaluation report. You do have some options there. But I want to quickly pause and see if you have any questions about these different types of supports that could be offered to a child. Yes.
If a child needs extra time for testing, is that a 504 accommodation that needs to be in place, or can you just request it, you know, as the test comes up?
That, I mean, it could fall under any of these categories, needing extra time. A child with an IEP may require extra time. A child with a 504 may require extra time, but that is a conversation to have with the school so that, you know, you have that in place before the test happens. I don't think that it will be tricky for a teacher to sort of one-off say, sure, you can have extra time. There needs to be an evidence-based reason why the child needs extra time. So if your child is eligible for an IEP, again, that's that individualized education plan. There'll be a team to decide what that plan should look like, and then to meet every year to talk about the progress your child is making and whether there should be changes made to the IEP plan so that your child continues to make progress. So who's part of the IEP team? You are, and by you I mean you, parent or guardian. Very, very important part of the team. You have an equal voice as the school. They may be general education and special education experts, but you are an expert in your child. So please be an active participant of that team. Also, as part of that team, there'll be at least one special education teacher, one general education teacher. There will be a school employee there who's familiar with the types of things that the school can offer your child. If your child also qualifies for a gifted support, that teacher will also be there. And in the last few slides, we're going to talk about gifted education as well, because very possible that a child with special education is also eligible for gifted education. But we'll go into a little more detail about that in a bit. You'll also need someone who can explain the evaluation, because the evaluation is not always the most straightforward thing. So likely that you'll have a school psychologist or maybe the special education director reading through the evaluation, explaining it. Yeah, let me just add one more thing.
Go ahead.
And then if the student, if appropriate. So generally if the student is older and feels like they might be able to and would want to contribute to the conversation, absolutely it's appropriate for the child to attend an IEP meeting as well. Question.
Sorry to interrupt. There is a question online that says, does child evaluation for special needs have age limits?
No age limits at all. Yeah, thank you for that question. I would hope that if a child had been attending a school, the same school for most of their education, that if the child required special education and it had been identified earlier than if they were in 12th grade, but it is very possible that it is not identified until then. So it could be kindergarten, it could be 12th grade. If a child was eligible for early intervention services, that can easily carry over into kindergarten as well. And then I should note that the child's IEP follows them. So every year the child's IEP stays with them. It may be updated, but it follows them. And if a child moves to another public school, whether it's a charter school or another school district, the IEP also follows the child. Who else can attend? You can bring whoever you would like to the meeting. So if you're one of the people, adults out there, and I know this is the case for me sometimes, where you're so busy listening and participating that you don't have time to take notes, you can bring your friend with you, your sister, your mother, anyone else that you feel comfortable who might be able to contribute to the meeting also. You will be given notice of when that IEP meeting is going to happen. These days, sometimes they can be done over Teams or Zoom or Google Meet, depending on what your school district uses. If that's easier for you, that's great. If not, they're also being done in person now. And you should know that the IEP team will meet at least once a year, but you have the right to call an IEP meeting whenever you'd like. So for example, if you are concerned about your child's progress or you feel like their needs have changed, you can absolutely give the school a call and say, I want to meet with the IEP team. Any other questions on this piece of information, IEP meetings? Do you have your hand up? Or are you saying hi?
Just following up on the building on the private school question, if your child gets an IEP at a private school, does that transfer to a public school as well, and vice versa?
I would, yes. If it's going to a public school, absolutely. And then the IEP team will meet early in the year to talk about any changes that need to be made. But public to private, like I said, you'd have, highly recommend checking in with a private school to see what of those supports they would be willing to implement at a private school setting. I'd just like to put this picture in here. That's the first page of an IEP. The IEPs, just to give you forewarning, they can be 35 pages, 60 pages. It really depends on the needs of your child. But if you have any questions about it, please ask the IEP team to explain it to you. So what are some of the things that would be inside an individualized education plan? Well, first, you should know the goal is to make sure that your child is receiving a free, appropriate public education. The acronym is called FAPE, but what that really means is your child making progress in light of their disability? It is individualized. As I said, it's going to be specific to your child. It is very rare that any two IEPs are going to be completely identical because it's going to be based on the needs of that particular child. We'll take a look at the assessments that were done and the results of those assessments to identify what are the supports and services that this specific child needs. The IEP will include present levels, meaning where is your child functioning now? It may include transition services. So for children who are 14 years and older, the IEP team starts looking forward as to what the child might want to do after they graduate. And a word on graduation, your child could graduate on credits and grades, or the IEP team may decide that the child is going to remain in school longer to achieve some IEP goals. And based on the latest court case that was filed and guidance from the Pennsylvania Department of Education, now students with disabilities can attend school until age 22, if that is something that the IEP team thinks is appropriate. The IEP and the team will decide whether a child is eligible for extended school year services. So there are a couple, your district will have a program over the summer for some students with disabilities. Not all students with disabilities will qualify, but for students, for example, who have trouble retaining information, they may attend they may be provided an offer to attend a summer program called Extended School Year. It is not a required program. So if you decide your child needs a break or your family is going on vacation or going to visit family for the summer, the child does not have to attend, but it is an option, extended school year for certain children. The IEP will contain goals. So what are the goals that we want the child to reach? And that will depend on what their needs are, whether they have academic goals and needs, or whether they have social needs, behavioral goals. That will be listed specific to your child. And then it will also include, well, then what are we going to modify for the program? So for example, does the child need extra time for tests? Does the child need, some children with behavioral issues have a lot of trouble with transitions. They don't like changing classes. They don't like change in general. So sometimes some of the accommodations may be giving the child a little bit of extra time to transition before classes, giving them a warning beforehand that soon we're going to be transitioning to try to make it a more gentle transition. There are related services. So for example, if there's a child who requires specialized transportation, that might be listed in there. Gifted services, again, we'll have a chance to talk about that in a while, but that could also be in the IEP. And then finally, education placement. So that means how long your child will be educated, for how many hours a day will your child be educated with the rest of the general school population. So are they being pulled out? Are they always going to be in with their peers? The law requires that every child is educated in what we call the least restrictive environment. And that means, to the greatest ability possible, every child should be educated with their non-disabled peers. We are not separating students with disabilities from other students. Rather, they should all be educated together with those supports for kids with special education being pushed into the classroom. There may be some times of day, some situations where, yes, students with disabilities may go to a different skill-based classroom for part of the day, but really the goal is let's have all of our children growing up together and learning together. Questions on the IEP? Oh, yes.
Thank you so much. So regarding the measurable academic and social skill goals, do they go hand in hand, for instance, or do they start first with one, then another?
You can have multiple goals in an IEP, yeah. So every single need of the child should be addressed in one IEP. So if you have a child who has academic goals for reading, as well as math, as well as behavioral, all of those goals will be listed in the same IEP. So example of what a goal may look like, for someone who's still learning to read, it may be, Angela will recognize 80% of the time 12 out of 15 sight words. And that may be one goal. And they'll measure that every period of time, which will also be listed. So maybe weekly, Angela will be tested. And that's how the team will be able to see, is Angela making progress? Or if Angela's not making progress, then the team needs to change the instruction that the child is getting to make sure that they can achieve that goal. Yes?
Regarding the extension for summer classes for special needs, if you're not eligible, can you request? Can you request for one for your kid?
Extended school year, if your child does have an IEP and the IEP says no, they're not eligible for ESY, you can say to the team, IEP team, I want to talk about this because I do think my child is eligible and should go to extended school year. If your child does not have a disability, it's unlikely that the school will let you go to an extended school year program, but some schools do have summer programs. Like, I don't know if anyone goes to Pittsburgh Public, but there's the Boost program. There are some other summer options.
For free?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. If you disagree, you always have the right to disagree. If you have concerns about the special education program or the way it's being implemented, you have a number of different options. When the IEP team makes a decision, they will often issue something called a Notice of Recommended Educational Placement. It is essentially a form that will be sent to you as the guardian or the parent, and it'll say what action the school is trying to take. We would like to place Angela in this particular special education program for this many hours a day, and you have the right on that form. You'll see you can say yes and sign your name, or you can say no and I want another IEP meeting to talk about it. Or you can have mediation where someone, a neutral party, will come in and try to help both sides come to some sort of understanding. Or you can request a due process hearing where you would actually have a hearing officer hear your case. If you feel like you might get to that point, please feel free to reach out to our office. We're happy to give you sort of one-on-one consultation and help you understand what that process is. And there's our number at the bottom. So please feel free to give us a call. Again, chatting with us is free. If there's one piece of advice I just want to make sure everyone remembers is please don't sign anything until you fully understand it. Feel free to ask questions to your school. There is no such thing as a silly question. Try your best to put your questions in writing. If you can email your school, that's always best, just so there's a record later in case the school says, no, that's not what I said, and you say, I know that's what you said. I know I understood you. So it's best to try to put things in writing, but more than anything, take your time and read documents. If you need them to be translated, please tell the school they need to be translated. Otherwise, take your time and ask as many questions as you can.
So I'm kind of passionate about this slide because I think for immigrants and for marginalized groups in the U.S., we don't speak up enough, right? We tend to say, okay, if the school said it, then it must be right, or I don't know enough to question. And in the work that I do, I mean, I just see so much disparity and inequities when you're looking at the services, the special education services and placements that white American students get versus immigrant students with disabilities or students with disabilities from marginalized communities. Like, I just really want to stress this slide because if you have a question, if you disagree with something, please call the number. And I know Hethel is going to give it again. Just talk to someone so that your child, I mean, most schools try to do their best by kids, for sure, but there are some kids getting services that your kid should be getting, but your child is not getting just because you're not speaking up. So please, all of us, ask questions. Yeah, that's why you call.
Yeah, you can call me, but you know, another way of thinking about it is you don't have to be the education experts in the room. But for example, if you're at an IEP meeting and they're putting all these goals in place and you think to yourself, you know, you keep getting my child in trouble because he keeps getting up and leaving the room in the middle of class, and he keeps getting in trouble for that. What can you do about that, team? Ask the team to help you and come up with the solution. And they will say, oh, we see this a lot, actually. Many children like to get up and leave the classroom, sometimes leave the building completely. It happens. And there are skill-building techniques that the school can use so that the child will slowly begin to reduce this behavior and maybe be able to recognize, okay, why do I want to get up and leave the room? Am I feeling overwhelmed? Is it when the work becomes too hard, I just want to leave? Or, I mean, it could be something as similar as them not really understanding they need to remain seated for the whole class, but identify that for the team. Say, you're saying he's doing this at school. He doesn't even do this at home. You're saying he does this at school. What can you, team, do for this? And so don't be nervous that this is a whole new world. I do understand that. And please know that we have so many families call us, whether they have resources, don't have resources, whether they grew up here or not, and they say, I don't even know where to start. My child just received an autism diagnosis. I don't know what that means. The school says I need to do this evaluation, I need to sign this paper, I have to go to this meeting. I'm overwhelmed and I don't know where to begin. Please give us a call. We also, again, have those written resources if you're the type of person who likes to talk, but then also read quietly on your own. Give us a call back and ask questions. Please do that. But know that schools have hundreds, sometimes thousands, of students with disabilities, so they are used to having to explain everything to parents, and in fact, they actually have an obligation to explain these things to you. Yes?
A question from online. Do you advocate for the parents with the schools for free?
Yes, in some cases we will, and I only say in some cases because we have so few lawyers and so many people who need assistance. So unfortunately, we don't always have the capacity to go with every parent, but we're happy to talk on the phone with you about if we can't come with you to a meeting, to say, here are some of the things it sounds like you should be talking about with your team. Also, if you give us a call, we can give you a referral to free special education advocates, who are people, they're not lawyers, but they are incredibly experienced and well-trained in terms of special education advocacy. They may also be able to come with you to a meeting, so you can give us a call if you'd like a list of those special education advocates. Okay. Thank you for asking such great questions and being engaged on Saturday afternoon. I'm going to skip this one. Okay, let's move on. Okay, good. To gifted education. This was another topic that we were asked to speak about. I'm going to talk a little bit less about gifted education, but you're going to notice that it's very similar, the process, to special education. But of course, what you're testing for is different than special education. A mentally gifted student, the definition is that student has outstanding intellectual and creative ability, the development of which requires specially designed programs or support services, or both, not ordinarily provided in the regular education program. So schools and classrooms often differentiate between different levels of student ability. Some of your children's, depending on their age, may have different math levels, for example, for the same grade. So there are ways that they'll differentiate. But there may be circumstances where a child needs to go above and beyond what the general education teacher can offer. Every school must find students in need of gifted education, and they need to develop criteria for identifying mentally gifted students. So most schools have a screener test, which they give to all students in the second grade, and then again to all students in the sixth grade or something like that. But of course, parents can also ask for that evaluation if they feel that that's appropriate. So the evaluation to determine whether a child would qualify for gifted education services, again, it's going to be multidisciplinary. Here's sort of the different criteria that I listed here. So they may be working at a year or more above grade level in one or more subjects. They could be acquiring and retaining new academic content or skills that show that they're retaining, that information at a greater rate than their peers. Maybe their actual academic performance is really ahead of all of their peers and beyond what their general education teacher can meet. They may have a high level of thinking skills, academic criteria, communication skills, technology expertise. An IQ test won't be the sole measure, but it could be very important if a child's IQ is elevated. If a child is an English learner, then those tests may be administered in that child's language of preference, but also the school needs to consider and separate make sure that they're not evaluating the child's English language abilities, but rather their other abilities and whether they excel and therefore qualify for gifted education. Parent input, of course, is going to be part of a gifted evaluation. They'll usually give you maybe a multiple choice or a form to fill out where you can talk about what you see your child interested in at home and places where you see your child excel. It's actually written into the law that any tests that are given to a child must be free from bias against different language or cultures or disability. So remember that we talked about an individualized education plan, an IEP for special education services. For those children who qualify for gifted services, they would receive a GIEP, which of course would be written by a GIEP team, which will include parents or guardian. The student may also join one or more of the child's teachers, a representative from the district who can commit resources. Again, if this is sounding familiar, it's because it's very similar to the types of educators and family members that must be part of an IEP team. The GIEP team will also meet at least once per year, and the GIEP will include information such as what specially designed instruction will be provided to the student. And it will indicate how often and where that special instruction will be provided. Again, you have the same types of rights to disagree. So if your child is not found eligible, but you disagree with the results, or if you disagree with anything written in the GIEP, you of course have those same due process or mediation rights. I'll do one more slide, then I'll open it up for questions. Some children are twice exceptional. Sometimes they call it dual exceptionality, where your child requires special education supports and services and also gifted education services. If they need to be evaluated, the Pennsylvania Department of Education really encourages those evaluations to be done at the same time, so hopefully both within that 60-day period. And instead of having a separate IEP and a GIEP, instead the gifted education teacher would join the IEP team like we talked about earlier. And so your child's IEP would contain all of their special education supports and services as well as any gifted education supports and services that your child would require as well. So questions so far on gifted education? Okay, so I think we are on our last slide. I'm going to plug our intake line again. Please feel free to give us a call anytime. We get calls from other advocates, from lawyers, from parents, guardians, students themselves call, sometimes staff, school staff gives us a call. What you'll do is leave us a message with a brief description of why you're calling. If there's any hearings or deadlines coming up, let us know in the message, and then leave us your name and number, and then we'll call you back within 2 days. And then sometimes you'll be able to talk with an attorney. Sometimes they'll make sure you also get a fact sheet if we have some of the written information that's relevant to what you're asking about. And we can also refer you to a special education advocate, like I mentioned earlier, if that would be helpful to you. We do represent some families every year, but again, that just depends on our capacity. But we will do our best to give you as much assistance as we can provide. So that's the end of it for me. So does anyone have any other questions about special education or gifted education? Each district is going to come up with how they're going to screen students, so it will look different, yes. But each district is required to identify those students who do kind of meet that initial criteria or could meet that initial criteria.
Request for an evaluation for the gifted education from kindergarten or from middle school or what?
Sure, you can request it whenever you like. So whenever you feel like it's appropriate for your child to be tested, if you're noticing in kindergarten that they are very advanced, absolutely you can ask for it then.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I think you're being handed surveys to fill out, so thank you very much for your time and attention. Do you want to close this out?
Thank you. Thank you, Hital. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Holly from the Global Switchboard. Thank you, everyone who is filling out the survey. Those of you who are watching online, the link is posted, so please, if you can fill out the survey, that helps us bring this training to more people. This is only the 5th or 6th one that we've done, and so we're trying to improve it every time. We want to bring more information to more people, so if you can help us with that survey, that would be very, very helpful. And I just want to thank Funmi and Faye for bringing us here. And can you guys just come up just for a second? Just show your beautiful faces up here. Oh, no, please, please. For the people at home, Auntie Funmi. We're here today because of the hard work. Funmi did all the research for this and all the work, and Faye, this is a team effort, but Faye also has been bringing these trainings to a lot of different people from different countries all over Pittsburgh, so I just want to thank you guys.